pleasant day tuition everyone. My name is FATIMA TARANG from Study Hub number 4. And in this video, we are going to tackle about the full coverage of Module 2 in PED 1 about learning-centered psychological principles. In 1990s, the American Psychological Association or APA appointed a group, a task force on psychology in education, to conduct further studies in psychology and education. The purpose of this group was to conduct studies that could further enhance the current understanding of educators on the nature of the learners about the teaching and learning process. The end goal was to improve the existing school practices so that learning becomes more meaningful to all kinds of learners. There are 14 learning-centered psychological principles, and these are categorized as cognitive and metacognitive factors, motivational and affective factors, developmental and social factors, and the last is individual difference factors. The 14 learning-centered psychological principles have the following aspects. They focus on psychological factors that are primarily internal to and under the control of the learner rather than conditioned habits or psychological factors. However, the principles also attempt to acknowledge external environment or contextual factors that interact with these internal factors. The principles are intended to deal holistically with learners in the context of real-world learning situations. Thus, they are best understood as an organized set of principles. No principles should be viewed in isolation. The 14 principles are divided into those referring to cognitive and metacognitive, motivational and affective, developmental and social, and the last is individual difference factors influencing learners and learning. Finally, the principles are intended to apply to all learners from children to teachers and administrators to parents and to community members involved in our educational systems. And now, let's go to cognitive and metacognitive factors. This refers to the mental processes the learners undergo as they process information. The concern of the metacognitive factors is the way learners think about their thinking as they engage in mental tasks. It also involves various strategies that one uses to learn something. On the other hand, metacognitive factors involve the monitoring and evaluation of cognitive factors. The principle number 1 is the nature of the learning process. We all know that learning is the key process in human behavior, and there are different types of learning processes like motor learning, verbal learning, attitude learning, and many more. And the example of learning process is when a child learns how to clap its hands by seeing someone else do it. Learning also takes place through direct experiences, and a child normally will learn from their parents, teachers, and the environment. Learning through experience is the most effective way of teaching. Teachers play a significant role in guiding their learners to become active, goal-directed, and self-regulating, and to assume personal responsibility for their learning. The learning activities and opportunities provided by the teacher are very important situations where learners can integrate knowledge and concepts to their experience. Now let's move to the next principle, the principle number 2. Goals of the learning process. Personal learning goals are the behaviors, knowledge, or understandings that students identify as important to their own learning. They may relate to general work habits, specific subjects, domains of learning, or a combination of this. Personal learning process are about improving students' learning and achievement and building students' capacity to learn. Learners need to be a goal-directed. Teachers have to guide learners in terms of determining their personal goals. They need to set their goals, not dictated by others, to ensure their willingness to achieve them. Students who set their own goals have more confidence to take on more challenging tasks, regardless of their ability. Their motivation to improve and master a task is improved, and their self esteem remains strong, even in the case of failure. When students are assisted to delve into their own thinking and learning processes, they are drawn to think about the effectiveness of the strategies they use to achieve the learning goals they set. When learners have good understanding of the concepts discussed in school, they can reach long-term goals most likely. Indeed, it is challenging to motivate learners to succeed. And the next principles will be discussed by my other group mates, and the next reporter is Miss Sharifamae Antonio.
Good day to each and everyone. I'm SHARIFAMAE Antonio from BSED-English 1T. So for today's video, I'm going to tackle about the principles of learning-centered psychological principles, which is the constructions of knowledge, strategic thinking, and thinking about thinking.
The constructions of knowledge is an active process that happens through individual or social engagement.
So this implies that trainers should provide learners opportunity to socially and individually engage in the process of making meaning by using participatory method.
In planning a new lesson to be presented, teachers would usually find it more effective when they connect the learner's existing knowledge to new information. Sharing prior knowledge can be done in creative strategies like concept mapping, group activities, and other collaborative techniques where learners are also able to learn from each other's experiences.
So let's proceed now to the next topic, which is strategic thinking.
Strategic thinking is a person's ability to use knowledge in different ways to solve problems, address concerns and issues, decrease difficulties in certain situations, and make sound decisions and judgments in varied conditions. Strategic thinkers do not easily give up even in difficult situations. They are more challenged to find ways to solve a problem no matter how many times they already failed.
So strategic thinker is not afraid to commit any mistake because they perceive them as a meaningful experiences to continuously discover other ways of arriving at solutions.
To motivate and encourage the learners to be more creative and innovative in their ideas, opinions, and responses are must for teachers.
So let's move on now to the next principles, which is thinking about thinking.
The ability to change them, it is a step further than simple awareness of thought processes, incorporating the ability to alter thoughts and behaviors. Successful learners can reflect on how they think and learn, set reasonable learning or performance goals, select potentially appropriate learning strategies or methods, and monitor their progress towards these goals.
So thinking about thinking is one of the most important of all the habits of mind. This habit is the one that lets you know how and when all of the other habits are working. So that's all for today's video, guys. Once again, I'm Sharifamae Antonio. Allow me to introduce to you the next reporter from our group, which is Miss Justine Kate Salimbot.
A pleasant morning to each and everyone, especially to you, Coach Jay. I am Kate Justine Salimbot from Study Hub number 4. In this video, I will tackle about the principle number 6, 7, and 8. So let's start with principle number 6, context of learning. Learning is influenced by environmental factors, including culture, technology, and instructional practices. Learning does not occur in a vacuum. Teachers a major interactive role with the both learner and the learning environment. Cultural or group influences on students can impact many educationally relevant variables, such as motivation, orientation toward learning, and ways of thinking. Technologies and instructional practices must be appropriate for learners' level of prior knowledge, cognitive abilities, and their learning and thinking strategies. The classroom environment, particularly the degree to which it is nurturing or not, can also have significant impacts on student learning. So now, let us proceed to principle number 7 and 8, which is under the motivational and affective factors.
Motivational and affective factors is the motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by the individual's emotional states, beliefs, interests, and goals, and habits of thinking.
Motivational and emotional influences on learning. What and how much is learned is influenced by the motivation. Motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by the individual's emotional states, beliefs, interests, and goals, and habits of thinking. The rich internal world of thoughts, beliefs, goals, and expectation for success or failure can enhance or interfere the learner's quality of thinking and information processing. Students' beliefs about themselves as learners and the nature of learning have a marked influence on motivation. Motivational and emotional factors also influence both the quality of thinking and information processing as well as an individual's motivation to learn. Positive emotions, such as curiosity, generally enhance motivation and facilitate learning and performance. Mild anxiety can also enhance learning and performance by focusing the learner's attention on a particular task. However, intense negative emotion, example anxiety, panic, rage, insecurity, and related thoughts, example worrying about competence, ruminating about failure, fearing punishment, ridicule, or stigmatizing levels generally detract from motivation, interfere with learning, and contribute to low performance. So now let's proceed to principle number 8, intrinsic motivation to learn. The learner's creativity, higher order thinking, and natural curiosity all contribute to motivation to learn. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by tasks of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevant to personal interests, and providing for personal choice and control. Curiosity, flexible, and insightful thinking, and creativity are major indicators of the learner's intrinsic motivation to learn, which is in large part a function of meeting basic needs to be competent and to exercise personal control. Intrinsic motivation is facilitated on tasks that learners perceive as interesting and personally relevant and meaningful, appropriate in complexity and difficulty to the learner's abilities, and on which they believe they can succeed. Intrinsic motivation is also facilitated on tasks that are comparable to real world situations and meet needs for choice and control. Educators can encourage and support learners' natural curiosity and motivation to learn by attending to individuals' differences in learners' perceptions of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevance, and personal choice and control. So now, we will proceed to principle number 9, 10, and 11, which will be tackled by Christine Duarte.
Good morning, classmates, especially to you, Coach Jay. It's me again, Christine JHANDERIE Duarte, the little teacher of Study Hub 4. Today, I will tackle about motivational and effect factors, developmental and social factors.
Motivational and effective factor. The effective motivational aspects include emotions related to a specific situation or interest and motivation related to a task or subject matter.
Effects of motivational on effort. The willingness to exert this effect is unlikely without coercion. Motivation determines what consequences are reinforcing and punishing. For example, student with high level of motivation for classroom achievement and high GPS are reinforced by receiving a grade of A, and they feel punished if they receive a grade of F. Development and social factors. Developmental influence on learning. As individuals develop, there are different opportunities and constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when the differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domain is taken into account. Development influence are events that impact the dynamic interaction between an individuals and their environment. For example, the physical and emotional. If a child is bullied, then she can be depressed and restrict themselves from being hanging out with his friends and family. Social influence on learning. Learning is influenced by social interaction, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. Social environment influence learning by creating a language environment, an experience environment which stimulates the mind to grow by systematically rewarding a child for learning. For example, a student may alter his or her behavior to match that of other students in a class. And that's all. So now let's proceed to the next reporter, NURWIENA ASJARI.
Good day, coach, and to my fellow classmates. So, in this video, I'm going to tackle about the individual differences factors. So, before I start, allow me to introduce myself. I am NURWIENA ASJARI from BSED-ENGLISH 1P. So, there are the three types of individual learning factors. So, the first is individual differences in learning. The second one is learning and diversity. And the third one is standard and assessment. Learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning function of prior experience and heredity. Individuals are born with develop their own capabilities and talents. In addition, through learning and social acculturation, they learn. However, these preferences are not always useful in helping learners reach their learning goals. Educators need to help students examine their learning preferences and expand, modify them. If necessary, the interaction between learning differences and curricular and environmental conditions is another key factor affecting learning outcomes. Educators need to be sensitive to individual differences are accepted and adapted to by varying instructional methods and materials. So, it is important for teachers to know variables such as physical characteristics, intelligence, perception, gender, ability, learning styles, which are individual differences of learners. So, now let's proceed to learning and diversity. So, what is learning and diversity? So, learning and diversity. Learning is most effective when differences in learners, linguistic, culture, backgrounds, and taken into account. The same basic principle of learning, motivation, and effective instruction apply to all learners. However, language, ethnicity, race, belief, and socioeconomic status all can influence learning. Careful attention to these factors in the instructional setting enhance the possibilities for designing and implementing appropriate learner environments. When learners perceive that their individual differences in abilities, backgrounds, cultures, and experiences and valued, respected, and accommodated in learning tasks and contexts, level of motivation and achievement are enhanced. So, what are the benefits of learning in diverse environment? Ultimately, studies show that diversity in education, particularly on college campuses, improve that intellectual engagement, self-motivation, citizenship, and cultural engagement. and academic skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and writing. So now, let's proceed to standards and assessment. So, what is standards and assessment? So, standards and assessment, setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learners as well as learning progressing, including diagnostic, process, and outcomes assessment are integral parts of the learning process. Assessment provides important information to both the learners and teacher at all stages of learning process. Effective learning takes place when learners feel challenged to work towards appropriately high goals, therefore appraisal of the learner's cognitive strength and weaknesses, as well as current knowledge and skills. It is important for the selection of instructional materials of an optimal degree of difficulty. Ongoing assessment of the learner's understanding of the curricular materials can provide valuable feedback to both learners and teachers about progress toward the learning goals. Standardized assessment of learners' progress and outcomes. Assessment provides one type of information about achievement level both within and across individuals that can inform various types of programmatic decisions. Performance assessment can provide other sources of information about attainment of learning outcomes. Self-assessment of learning progress can also improve students' self-expressal skills and enhance motivation and
So that's
self-directed
all.
learning.
Thank you for watching my video. Once again, I am NURWIENA, a member of Study Hub number 4.